is Fantasy Football Picks and Bets presented by Prize Picks. Use code MMN when you deposit at prizepicks.com to get a match deposit of up to $100. Meaning, if you deposit $100, you will have $200 to play with on prizepicks.com. Check out the fantasy props, the overs and the unders. Coming up momentarily, Pete Overzet is going to have the DraftKings first look and research for you for the week to get started, to get your plans on the go, to go win some of that money. Plus, I do want to let you know that if you go to runthesims.com/Mayo, you'll get a discount on the DFS Optimizer, the single game showdown simulator, and you can run everything, including your own custom projections, up to 10,000 times to see the distribution of floor and ceiling and where those median projections are going to be. I highly recommend it. runthesims.com/Mayo. Enough of me. Let's get to Pete.
All right, everyone. I'm Peter Overzet, back as always here recording on a Monday afternoon to give us the first look at the following week's salaries for the DFS slate on DraftKings. We do this every week. It is the foundation in the primer for your DFS research. As always, lots of stuff changes, lots of injury news, shifting landscape, all of that good stuff. But I like to think of this as a way to get our bearings on what this slate might look like. I should also mention I'm a little under the weather today, so I'm battling through. I apologize if my energy levels and my excitement for punt plays isn't quite what it usually is, but let's dive into this slate. We do have a decent amount of teams that aren't on the main slate this week. We have 4 teams on bye: the Colts, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Eagles. I guess not any juggernaut offenses we're missing there on offense, but the Colts, I think, are interesting. No Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman's been playing well. And no Eagles either. We don't have to deal with the quarterback situation. And I am sure Philly Talk Radio will take care of that for us. Also not on the main slate, Steelers and Vikings play on Thursday Night Football. Bears Packers are Sunday Night Football. And then the Rams and Cardinals are going to be a super fun Monday Night Football game. But of course, that means we don't get Cooper Kupp, no Kyler Murray on the main slate. We do have one premier game this week. It is in the 4 p.m. slate. We have the Bills versus the Bucs, and that's the only game I'm seeing right now with an over 50. It opened at 52.5. That, of course, is going to be a very popular fantasy game, and the Bills play tonight against the Patriots, so we'll have to see if anything shakes out with them. I know Zach Moss has been kind of an interesting player in that he was a healthy scratch last week, so there'll be some more information we get about them tonight, but looking forward to that game. There's a few other intriguing games to me. The Chiefs and the Raiders looks kind of interesting. The 49ers and Bengals, to me, that has some shootout potential. And the Cowboys play the Washington football team as well. I could see that be a pace-up game. So we're going to dive into it, go through all of the positions here, see what stands out to us. And if you guys are not subscribed to the channel, please do. We are here every Monday. And of course, forthcoming this week will be more DFS picks, more sports betting picks, all of that good stuff. The Mayo Media Network has you covered. And if you want to dive into more data-intensive research for DFS, I highly recommend Run the Sims. You can get 10% off with promo code Pete. You can run batches of simulations, 10,000 simulations for every main slate, every showdown slate. It is really the best way to play DFS right now. I can't recommend it enough. If you have questions about it, you can ask myself, you can ask Pat Mayo. We'll get you squared away. Let's start off right here at quarterback. Obviously, Josh Allen and Tom Brady on the high end in this game that is going to be very popular at 7,800, 7,600. We have Pat Mahomes, though, is the highest quarterback on the slate. Historically, he's done very well against the Raiders, but man, that team is in a slump right now. They, of course, had very muted production last night. You look at these last 2 games, 9 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points for Patrick Mahomes, although at home versus the Raiders looks like a get-right spot, but just not quite the slam dunk that Mahomes used to be. We do have Lamar Jackson here, who's also been struggling a bit, and I do not love this spot on the road against Cleveland. That feels like it could be a much slower paced game. He's coming off of 3 straight games where he hasn't cleared 20 fantasy points. So just my initial take here is that Allen and Brady are going to garner a ton of ownership here at this high end. Justin Herbert at home versus the Giants. The Giants have been kind of a tough defense in that they've just been getting to the quarterback and not allowing a ton of fantasy points. But Herbert's one of the hottest quarterbacks going right now. You can see his box score, 38, 24, 29 points. That will be an interesting game. Seattle showing a little bit signs of life yesterday. Wilson finally cooking a bit, threw a touchdown to Lockett, threw a touchdown, I believe it was to Eskridge, if I'm recalling that correctly. I apologize. I'm under the weather this week, as I said. So I'm battling through the elements here, trying to remember what happened yesterday. Joe Burrow is an interesting one. We're going to have to keep tabs. He hurt his finger, and he was grimacing on the side when he was coming back into the game yesterday. So we'll have to see if he is back to full strength. But I have some interest in that game against San Francisco, and I like that they're at home there. I assume we're going to get another Taysom Hill start. This is a much better spot for him against the Jets at home than, against Dallas there. So I think this could be a very fun spot for Taysom. I mean, he didn't even play great. He had 4 interceptions and had 27 fantasy points. He looked shot out of a cannon on some of those rushes. So Taysom Hill will be a pretty fun fantasy play as usual if he gets the start. Derek Carr on the road at Arrowhead. Don't know how excited I am about that. Cam Newton at home versus Atlanta. That could be interesting at 5,400. I know he's had a roller coaster from that debut against Washington to a really disaster performance at Miami, but at home versus versus the Falcons is a much better spot there. So I don't see anything else jumping out to me. I know Tyrod Taylor is likely to miss some time here. So Davis Mills, I don't know if anyone's getting excited about playing him, but he will be $5,000 as well. And every week I leave a little candle on. Maybe we get a Trey Lance start, but not looking the case. Let's head over to running back, where we don't have a ton of options on the high end. One thing I noticed when I was taking a glance at the running backs is last week was all about the running backs in the 5,000s. We had Gibson, we had Montgomery, we had Jamal Williams, we had James Conner, we had Sony Michel. This week, it's all about the running backs in the 6,000s. I see lots of value here. Barkley at 6,000, Gibson 6,000, DeAndre Swift, if he returns, 6,600, Eli Mitchell, who's red hot, 6,700, Patterson, whose price never comes up at 6,900. Those plays all look pretty good to me. Kamara will definitely be interesting against the Jets if he's back at 7,900. Joe Mixon, it looked like he was going to fail on Sunday, but he found a way to get there and has been pretty consistent, although that was still a low point for him. That touchdown kind of saved his day. It'll be interesting to see if people are willing to go back to him. Fournette has been really solid of late, just operating as a true bell cow. He's going to project well at 7,400. The 5,000 range, Chuba Hubbard, getting his first start with McCaffrey once again out for the season. I'm guessing he's going to be a pretty popular play at 5,900. Devonta Freeman has actually been running pretty well. I've been impressed what I've seen out of him. He had 20 fantasy points, and it's these targets that are really nice for Devonta Freeman. 8 targets there, so I think he's going to be in play. We'll have to see what happens with this Denver backfield, but we do have Melvin Gordon here at 5,400. They did price up Javonte Williams just in case Melvin Gordon didn't play, and I think Javonte Williams earned the better price tag there at 5,900. He looked phenomenal on Sunday Night Football, put up 32.8 fantasy points. As of right now, I'm not noticing a lot of super cheap stuff that looks attractive to me. Adrian Peterson did see significant burn for the Seahawks, and they play Houston, so maybe there's something here where you get a vintage 20-touch Adrian Peterson game. You can see here, he did get that touchdown, but he was very inefficient, 11 attempts for 16 yards. But the Texans have been a get-right spot for a lot of offenses. So we just saw Jonathan Taylor get 32 carries against them, and certainly wouldn't blame anyone for kicking the tires on Adrian Peterson here. At wide receiver, like I said, no Cooper Kupp and no Justin Jefferson, who have been, some of our elite high-end guys. Tyreek Hill coming off a really poor game on Sunday Night Football, only 4 points. We've now seen a couple duds from him, but you still see mixed in here these 20-plus point games, but you're going to have to pay for it at 8,500. I'll be curious to see how interested the field is in playing him. Stephon Diggs in that juicy Bucks Tampa Bay game should be popular. I'm not sure if we're going to get Deebo Samuel back. Even if we do get him back, I doubt people are going to be too excited to play him at 8,000. Keenan Allen is probably too cheap for how well he's been playing. He had the 8 targets, the 2 touchdowns, not a ton of yardage, but still a very big focal point of their offense. I assume people are going to go back to the Chris Godwin well. Can't blame him after he had 17 targets. Just an insane workload for him in that game at home versus the Bills. Should be a pretty good spot for fantasy. Jamar Chase, he started the season red hot, and he's really cooled off here. Hasn't had a game over 13 points since week 7, but he just narrowly missed a touchdown yesterday. It bounced right off of his hands. It was actually extremely tilting. So I have no problem going back to Jamar Chase in this spot. Mike Evans looks too cheap to me at 6,600. He's going to be a popular play. Nice to see some signs of life with Seattle. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are certainly going to be in play in this high 6s range. And as usual, not a lot going in the cheap range for us at wide receiver. I'll keep looking here in the 5K range. Russell Gage, his price is up a little bit after he had a big week. Brandon Ayuk, I think, will be a solid play again if Debo's out. He had 6 targets. He isn't, with George Kittle really coming on, Ayuk doesn't have the runway to, get 10 plus targets, but he still offers a nice boom profile within this range. Amari Cooper, really cheap at 5,900. There were some concerns about his health heading into last Thursday's game, coming off of the COVID list. He did have one big play, but was otherwise pretty much held in check there. But at 5,900, I definitely don't mind that. Mike Williams' price comes up a little bit to 6,000 after his 7-target game. Nice to see him get the 100-yard bonus there. So as usual, tons of options in this 5K range here. Gallup looks a little too cheap to me at 5,500. Jarvis Landry also coming off of a massive target game, 10 targets, 111 yards. I assume the cash game bros are going to be pretty excited to play Jarvis Landry at 5,400. Let's see if we can do any dumpster diving for you here. Rashad Bateman, a little bit of a bummer. Was hoping he'd come on a little bit more. Only 1 target in that game. He's going to be too pricey. Sammy Watkins actually steals the touchdown there. But this has been the story of the year on DraftKings. Just so hard to find any cheap plays that are viable. Josh Reynolds took a bit of a backseat to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he still had 7 targets. Maybe a little meat on the bone there. Curtis Samuel, he did return, but only had 1 target. And I mean, you can just see his profile here. He's just not getting the workload to warrant any play there. And so, yeah, there's 2 guys here that scored touchdowns. Jalen Guyton, 4 targets, had that long bomb, and Freddie Swain. He didn't score. Sorry, that was Dwayne Eskridge, but he did score the week previously. But again, it's real gross down here. I haven't been playing a lot of pump play wide receivers. I did play DeVonta Parker last week at 3,900. But yeah, we'll have to stay tuned on the cheap wide receiver portion because it does not look good as I record on a Monday. Tight end, we do have Travis Kelce at 7,400, but after what he did on Sunday night, only 5.7 fantasy points. I'll be curious if people are willing to go back to him. That's a pretty hefty price tag for a guy who hasn't been as consistent as we saw last year. I assume people will be much more excited to play George Kittle after his monster game. We knew Kittle had this in him. The slate breaking performance just hadn't gotten there, and he finally does there in week 13, 42.6 points. Waller, we'll have to see if he returns. Gronk is going to be popular again. He just continues to score touchdowns. I guess he had a little bit of a cold spell there from touchdowns, but just continues to be a producer, whether through yardage or touchdowns. Those 2 touchdowns on 58 yards, good for 21.8 points last week. Tight end remains pretty juicy in this mid-range. Kyle Pitts viable, Dalton Schultz, Hawkinson, Knox, all of these guys pretty viable. Last week we did have Foster Moreau as the cheap pump play tight end, and he disappointed. It'll be interesting here. His price actually comes up to 4,000, but if Waller doesn't play again, he might be a more interesting option. Even though he's more pricey, the ownership might not be there in the way it was when he was super cheap. Gerald Everett was getting a decent amount of usage, but just making some really boneheaded mistakes. So I'll be curious to see what his role is like. But 6 targets from a $3,500 tight end isn't bad. Not a lot down here otherwise. I'm trying to see if I can squint and find any plays for you, but right now I'm not noticing it. Maybe John Bates with Logan Thomas likely to miss some time. He came in and saw 4 targets. He'll probably end up being kind of one of the popular punt play tight ends. And as always, we'll wrap up with defense here. I assume Giants at 2,300 against the Chargers will be in play for people. Everyone always loves paying down. Even the Jags versus Tannehill should be fine. What do we have on the upper end here? Chargers at home versus the Giants. Broncos at home versus Detroit. Broncos D has been really good. They held the Chiefs in check last night, although only yielded 4 fantasy points. The Saints versus the Jets looks pretty good. And let's see, what do we got in the mid-range? Definitely would be fine playing the Panthers at home versus the Falcons. That looks pretty good to me. And also like taking stabs on the Ravens and Browns whenever those two teams play. Those divisional matchups tend to be pretty juicy from a fantasy perspective. That is our first look on the slate. My big kind of takeaway is I think that Bills-Bucks game is going to be extremely popular, and lots of 6K running backs that look pretty nice. And wide receiver seems kind of like the most wide open of the positions as I look at it now. And maybe, just maybe, we will get some value. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, subscribe to the channel. Check out Run the Sims if you're looking to up your DFS game. I'm Peter Overzet. We'll see you guys next week.